Hello, welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Past Perfumance, and with me today to discuss this wonderful perfumance, is my good friend Kurtis Finlay. Say hi.
Hi, everybody. Good to be back. Looking forward to this great show right off the bat. Good job.
So a few bits of info to get underway. As mentioned, this is a review for Past Perfumance, released on the 21st of May, 1955. It's the 740th in the series, and it's directed by Chuck Jones. You can find this short among all the other Pepe Le Pew shorts on the Looney Tunes Superstars Pepe Le Pew DVD set, and I have a link below to that set. When that set was made, it was all mastered in high definition, so a high definition version is out there, and that's what I'm using for this review. It won't be on YouTube, unless Warner Brothers themselves choose to upload it on their own channel, as it is under copyright. In case you haven't seen this one, because you probably think, yeah, it's just another Pepe short, they're all the same. Well, this one at least has a nice variation. So we're in 1913, we're in Paris, we're at a movie studio, and after some shenanigans involving getting a skunk ready for a particular film shoot, well, Pepe shows up and we have the usual chase with the cat. So nothing too deep, but we'll go through everything. So excited about doing this one?
Yeah. Before, when you were scheduling me for this review, you were like, okay, well, I'm sorry, it's going to be a Pepe Le Pew cartoon. And I'm like, that's actually okay. I don't mind talking about Pepe Le Pew. And out of all of the Pepe Le Pew cartoons, this one is actually kind of fun with all of the French jokes and the animals and everything like that. It's actually it's quite fun.
It's one of the better ones, and I think a lot of the humor in this one is funny in spite of Pepe. I think Pepe is probably the weakest part of this. It sounds kind of weird, I know, but at least there's a lot of great things about this one, including all the old-timey movie references. And even Pepe itself, sure, it's my least favorite, but there's still a lot of good things about him in this one, so there's that too. So in terms of trivia, this one actually has quite a few, and most of it I'll go through as we go through the short, and of course, Kurtis, you can chime in too. But this is the first Pepe short that has Milt Franklin scoring as opposed to Carl Starling. And I've mentioned this before, his scores tend to have a different flavor to Carl Starling, but they're also quite similar as well. Under him, of course, so there's that.
Yeah, I feel like he's actually doing his best Carl Starling impression with this. And I think that's probably because Pepe has a pretty specific or unique sound to all of his scores. Carl Starling definitely did a lot to say, this is what a Pepe cartoon sounds like. And so Milt Franklin probably wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel at this point.
And even Jones, when it comes to making Pepe shorts, and Maltese as well as his writer here, they're not doing much here to really reinvent what's come before Pepe. It's just a matter of, okay, we've got Pepe, he's after this cat, we've got to somehow get paint on this cat, and we have a chase and a few gags, and it's in France too. And that's it. That's usually the formula.
So this one takes place in 1913, and this cartoon was made in 1955. So if this cartoon were made today, it would take place in 1982.
Wow, thanks for making me feel old. And I'm actually going to be turning 40. When we're recording this on the 6th of May, I'm turning 40 on the 10th of May. So, now I feel really old.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yay. But it's interesting, the whole time scale here, because for me, 10 years ago, it still feels like it's the 80s, when no, it's much longer than that.
But I feel like it's the same kind of thing. Like, people are making these shows like Stranger Things, which are now period pieces because they take place in the 80s. And that's essentially what's happening here, because even though 40 years isn't that long, but it's long enough that we see a lot of cultural differences in just the way people live their lives. And so you take that, but then you also transplant Pepe into France as well. And so it is the time period, and it's also the location that are making this one stand out among the other cartoons from this series.
Yeah, and this actually reminds me of an earlier short called Wild Over You, because that also takes place in France, as most of them are, but that one takes place in the turn of the century. It's like the World's Fair. So it's like they're revisiting that same idea, except that they're doing it a decade or so later instead of the World's Fair. Now we're in the movie studio, the silent period, basically. It's an interesting approach, at least they're creative in that front.
And the studio is called Studios de Pictures Motion, and they put in like the fake apostrophes in the middle of words, like you would kind of find it in French, just kind of stuff that doesn't exactly make sense to English speakers.
I love the production company's called the Super Magnifique Productions. so ridiculous. And I like the fact that, yeah, they did the fake French thing so well that anyone actually just reading it, you can go, oh yeah, that's what it's supposed to mean. But it's very clever how they did it. I'm always impressed when I see these things. But yeah, aside from this beautiful opening, by the way, the establishing shot is amazing. It's all beautiful looking. I mean, these shorts always look really nice, but I do have to point out that this is not Maurice Noble. Maurice Noble, because of the shutdown happening, Maurice Noble didn't actually return to the studio straight away. He came a little bit later. So the actual layout's done by Robert Gibbons and the background's done by Philip Degard. So Philip Degard has been around, of course, but it's actually done differently, but it's in the same wheelhouse.
I think by this point, Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies definitely has kind of a house style that they're going for. And so all of the major players on all of these teams, no matter who the director is, kind of play in the same sandbox in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the character designs as we see our little security guard. And if you watch this short really closely, you'll notice there's actually not too much by way of animation, at least for the background characters. The only real full animation are just the main characters, but everyone else, there's barely any animation on them. So security guard is probably a good example here. And who do we see in the background?
Reen 1818. Yeah. So good. Yeah, I love it. Putting the French inflection on Rin Tin Tin. He was a pretty famous movie star at this time, starring in his own series of films.
Yeah, and I believe all of them are pretty much in the public domain anyway, because they came out in the 20s, so you can pretty much look them up and watch them if you're so inclined. But the funny thing was, I was reading up on it, and apparently he was retired because they went to sound and he couldn't talk. I mean, he's a dog. It was really weird what I was reading, and I'm thinking that's a very bizarre thing. But that's who he is. I believe, a German Shepherd, and he was a world famous dog. But there's someone else that's famous that comes up where we hear Bonjour, Mademoiselle Beau.
Bonjour, Mademoiselle Beau.
And that's a reference. That's Clara Beau, spelled Beaux. Let it feel rar. That's such a weird way they've written it on the side.
Yeah, fille, la it fille. Fille meaning girl, so it's the it girl. Row.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Clara Bow, very famous silent film star at the time. So we got another reference, and a lot of these references just come back to the silent era. So we're talking 1910s to the 1920s. And sadly, a lot of this stuff would be forgotten today. But you can look at, again, a lot of this stuff is on YouTube. It's all in the public domain.
Like this little purple runabout, it reminds me of Dover Boys, because that's the same kind of time period. After the runabout, we see two Frenchmen, a short one and a tall one. They are carrying a trunk, I guess, and it says Mac Senate, except Mac is not M-A-C-K, it's M-A-C-Q-U-E, Mac Senate. And he was a prolific film director at the time. Canadian, actually. He did a lot with Keystone Cops, but he also created what was called the Senate Bathing Beauties. And so that's what we have here. We have the Mac Senate Beauties de Bath.
And I'm loving all these characters in costume waiting to get casted. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of these designs were just based off of just generic characters you would have seen at silent films at the time, because a lot of the silent films, because there was no sound, they'd be acting in very broad strokes. So of course the costumes were very loud as well, just to show off, hey, I'm a police officer, I'm a cowboy, and so on. But I love those designs, especially that ridiculous dress that's in the middle of that as well.
All of these actors are in different costumes, very stereotypical kind of Hollywood roles. There's a cop, there's a pirate, there's an Indian, and all of them have French mustaches and goatees. I think it's so funny. And as the camera pans, then you come across a bear who also has a mustache and a goatee. But that bear, I can't help but think of the Frank Tashlin kids book, The Bear That Wasn't. That book came out in 1946, and then Chuck Jones would make that into a cartoon later on when he's at MGM Studios.
Yeah, it's just one of those little interesting coincidences, and funnily enough, I've actually reviewed that short for the members of this channel, and that should be appearing for everyone pretty soon. So it's definitely a fascinating short, and it's a bit controversial in certain ways because Tashlin didn't like it and all that stuff, but I definitely go through it there. Now we see that there's a sign there, David Butler, and that appears to be a reference to silent film director David Butler. So he directed quite a few films. And again, you can look him up and you can see a lot of his work, but that's who that's referring to. Because I was a bit worried because David Butler is quite a common name, but no, there was definitely a prominent silent film director at the time. That's who they'd be referring to. But we see our casting director is going through the list of all these animals, and again, Chuck doing so much with so little, we just see these animals in these still shots and with these strong poses. But if his voice sounds familiar, and it's a very unusual sounding voice, it's actually Arthur Q. Bryan. And if you don't know who he is, he's the voice of Elmer. That would be his perhaps most famous role.
Check. 3 éléphants, check. 6 chimps Élysée, check. 2 raccoons, check. Un skunk avec la semelle removed de moi. Oh, pauvre moi.
It's not the first time he's done a non-Elmer role, but they are very few and far between. So I know he's in The Dangerous Dan Magoo by Tex Avery. That was his first appearance.
Hello, everybody.
And he was the customer trying to get a good night's sleep, and of course Daffy keeps stuffing it up.
I'm a tired man. I gotta have my sleep. Plenty of it. So see to it that I get lots of peace and quiet. Because if I'm disturbed at any time, I'm gonna bust you right in the nose!
Likeable chap, isn't he?
But all in all, he's done a few other roles in that, but I love his voice here. It's just a weird, light, wispy Elmer sounding Frenchman. It's kind of odd, isn't it?
It's actually really good, and you don't really get a chance to hear him doing a voice other than Elmer, so it's kind of nice to hear that he can do something else. I haven't followed his career or figured out where else he really appears, so it's nice to be able to hear him stretch his vocal cords in a different way.
Because even in his other non-Elmer roles, he still sounds like Arthur Q. Bryan, but without, of course, replacing the R's with the W's like with Elmer. So here he's doing something completely different, and it's not the only role he does in this short, and I'll definitely point out what else he does here. So I guess Chuck Jones must really love working with him. I mean, Hunting Trilogy and other stuff, so I'd imagine they would like working together, so there's that. So the casting director, he's going through his list, and he realizes the last thing on his list is to get a skunk and to remove the smell. But in the next shot, I just love how the director is being announced as entering the set. So he's got his whole, I guess, official trumpeter or something. I just thought that was a nice little touch there. It's just, okay, he goes on trumpeter. And one bit people may not be aware of is, like, who on earth are all these people behind him? So, of course, you got someone who can be a production assistant or whoever. But then you got these men going, we, or whatever, right? And that would be a play on the whole idea of yes men. At first it was kind of jarring. I'm thinking, what are they saying? Oh, they're saying we. Okay, they're yes men. I get it. Ha ha. But this director must have a lot of clout on set because, yeah, you got this lion roaring and he tells him to be quiet.
Be quiet!
That expression of the lion realizing, whoops, sorry. So that kills me. That absolutely kills me. But the casting director is saying, oh, I don't have a skunk ready, but then he sees our cat. And we got a story problem to solve. How do we get this cat to get the white stripe on? And wouldn't you know it, we need a skunk, so let's paint the white.
Gotta happen at some point.
I try. Oh, patience, mon directeur. Un skunk sans pew coming right up à vous. No le move, Mademoiselle Kitty, s'il vous plaît. No le hurt.
But what's really interesting is that we are almost halfway in the shot. Like, almost halfway. And it's only now that we're going to start seeing Pepe Le Pew come into the picture here. It's really interesting, isn't it?
That I find is actually it becomes a kind of a typical thing for a lot of these cartoons of this era, and not just Warner Brothers, but at different studios too. Because when you have a long-running series, you have to eventually make them more unique, especially with something like Pepe Le Pew, which is so redundant. So a lot of time is being spent on setup. And I think about things like Mighty Mouse from Terry Toons, because those ones, as the series got on, Mighty Mouse would appear later and later into the cartoon because there was so much time setting up. And of course, Mighty Mouse comes in to save the day. So he only comes in at the climax. So much of his cartoons, he's just not there. And I think the same thing's happening here for Pepe. He was pretty prominent at the start of his cartoons in the very early entries, but then as the series progresses and more setup happens, we see him less and less, which is actually okay by me because the casting director and all of this world is so much fun to explore.
I mentioned this in a few reviews. A lot of the Pepper shtick really does get old fast. So I'm glad that all that stuff that he's known for is just kept to a certain part of the short, and that's it. It doesn't feel like it overstays its welcome. Of course, unless you watch each short back to back, but if you're watching just the one short, it's just enough that doesn't get too old.
Pepe Le Pew walks into the scene and he meets the security guard that we've already met before. You have a contrast now of the soft, round figure of Pepe Le Pew that harkens back to the older days of Looney Tunes, mixed with this very, very angular security guard with minimal detail in his design, which is kind of the direction that not just Warner Brothers, but kind of all of animation style is kind of leaning toward going forward. It's neat to see these two characters right here back to back because they offer something completely different in terms of their visual style. And then on top of that, the background here of this gate that the security guard is standing in front of, plus the tree and the background, while it is stylized, it still makes sense. Like it's still a very kind of real world grounded background. But what I love in this cartoon is that once you get into the movie studio, all of the sets are just wild. If you look at all of the backgrounds, none of the lines are straight and the colors are off kilter and such. And it's so much fun because once you enter into the movie studio, you're in a completely different world than you are outside.
Again, as I pointed out, it's not Maurice Noble doing this, and yet it's in the same sort of wheelhouse that backgrounds just become a lot more exaggerated, especially once you get into this fantasy world of the movie sets.
And especially the movie studio sets are very Maurice Noble-esque, very much in that same style to some of his bests. And I think of like What's Opera Doc is a good example of the kind of the similarities. But I think that's also intentional because that one also is an opera that would have had sets as well. So it's neat to see the similarities there.
And I just like the limited animation of the security guard just not liking the smell. And, you know, we all know the shtick by now that people run away because of the smell. Of course, it is what it is. But I like the fact that the director gets scared off too, along with all the other crew, as we would expect at this point in time. And then the casting director returning back, thinking he's giving the skunk to the director. But who's sitting in the chair? It's Pepe, of course, reading the script, because why not? Maybe he was late for the shooting day. Does he even know he's in the film?
He's just generally clueless always.
Now that Pepe has arrived, the short does get into the usual, Pepe getting the cat and all that sort of stuff. But at least we've got some nice animation here.
And now, my little noblige of Oblace, we shall make it together the drama mellow. The birth of a notion. The grand illusion.
So Pepe chases Penelope onto the set, and it is a scene from Romeo and Juliet. And I can't think of a better play or movie to reference than Romeo and Juliet, of course, because of the romantic side of Pepe Le Pew.
Exactly. Although I have to correct you, though. It's actually Julio and Romiette.
Yes, that's right.
Sorry, I got to correct you on that. Sorry. We got to get it right. I always love his mispronunciations when he's doing his accent.
The sentimental one. She's wished to play Julio and Romiette.
Yeah, you're right. I think, regardless of anyone's thoughts on the Pepe character, this is perfect. This is the right way to go about it, although I do wish that he does go on more in depth in the speech from Romeo and Juliet. I think that would have been hilarious, but it is what it is. I like the fact that, as we said before, the background's all stylized, and I like how it's stylized even for the backdrop. So the setup when Penelope goes, we'll call her Penelope, she's not named here, but that's the accepted name. She goes up the stairs and she's trying to hide out from Pepe, who thinks, oh, this is actually perfect, and he changes into that ridiculous Romeo costume. I just love the way he looks in that shot.
My little much ado about something. My little lost labors loved. Drink that.
Yeah, it's a great costume, and it reminds me of just the ridiculousness of like the Scarlet Pumpernickel as well, kind of along the same lines.
And then we see, there's a bit there that's the merry-go-round. That's again this ridiculous French thing. And I noticed that the formula now, once Pepe gets involved, though, it becomes kind of the Roadrunner kind of spot gag-ish kind of thing where it's like one gag, next bit, one gag, next bit, and so on, so on. But it's within the confines of what was established. Chuck's daughter, Linda Jones, she was telling me when we did one review a while back that, a lot of the times the way that these stories would be structured was, it would be sort of half and half and half. So you'd have the slow start, but then it gets faster, then faster, then faster. So it was all by design. And once you know that, you can see how they've done it here. But we go into everyone's favorite film, the Les Tres Musketeers. Again.
I like how they spell that too, because that's not how you spell three in French. That's the phonetic spelling of it. Les Tres Musketeers.
Yes.
I love these French signs.
And we only see two of the three Musketeers here, so I don't know when the third one was meant to come in, when they were saying, quiet on the set, and we're now going to shoot this scene, and we see our first Musketeer, Athos, also voiced by Arthur Hugh Bryan. So he was one of the three Musketeers. Go figure.
Quiet! Lights, camera, relevez-vous, action, chez moi, ethos.
But the other one's interesting, though. Porthos, voiced by Michael Maltese himself, the writer.
Je ne vois Porthos.
That's amazing.
Why? I don't know, but maybe you just happened to be around and Jones said, do you want to just record that bit and that's it? I don't know. Who knows?
Has he done any other voices for Looney Tunes cartoon?
Sure has. He voiced Mussolini in a lot of the World War II shorts.
Right, that's the old stuff, kiddo. He's a smarter fellow with brains, huh?
He's also voiced that Italian dining patron in that Charlie Dog short, A Hound for Trouble.
I'm a want una bella piatta una cacciatore di tartazzini con ragù di marinara di la piazza ricottini mozzarella fine.
So he's definitely done voice work before, but not as common as Ted Pierce, for example, who was also known as a bit of an actor at times. But he's just there. He's just cameoed. All right, sure, let's do that. And by the way, Arthur Hugh Bryan and Mark Maltese also do a few crowd voices, some of the background sound effects that you hear, and that comes from Keith Scott's wonderful Cartoon Voices book, so he makes note of that the crowd's also done by them too. And Mel Blake does the rest, because of course he does, which is pretty typical by now. But the gag's great. I actually like this. I may be critical of Pepe's shorts in general, but some of these are clearly inspired. I love this one where it's like, you got Athos, Porthos, Pepe.
Chez moi, Pepe.
They definitely put a smile on her face. I thought that was pretty funny. But he finds Penelope's hiding inside the camera. She runs away, and probably my favorite part in this whole short is how Pepe goes in to the screening room. Two folks leave saying, "This picture stinks."
Because I love to run the mezzanine.
Sacre Pew, that picture stink.
Ha ha. Wonderful. Look at the layout of this shot. You just got the silhouette of Pepe there, and you've just this silent movie playing, and sure enough, the stink is so bad that even the actual dialogue card that pops up in its fake French saying, that everything stinks.
Yep, it's perfect.
Love that. And again, wonderful layout here, and because we then see that he tries to pass the popcorn to Penelope, who's right there. Minimal animation, but it works so well. We've got a bit of a chase scene, then again, this is pretty usual in these Pepe shorts, so we go around Uncle Tob's chalet, of course.
Chalet.
And that's a reference to the now very controversial, I must say, book Uncle Tob's Cabin, and I won't go into too deep into that, but it is a book that was made into a movie and so on, and it's considered very controversial today. We see an icy set. I'm not sure if that's referring to any specific film, but we see Tarzan reference. Gotta love Pepe's Tarzan, right? Just that yell.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And so that would be a reference to Johnny Weissmuller, who I don't think he was Tarzan at the time, because that's more contemporary. Weissmuller was Tarzan from 1932. So that would have been before the context of this film in particular. But all of this stuff, Uncle Tom's Cabin, the Three Musketeers, all of these sets that they're going through were novels that were written probably about 50 years before this time period, 1913. So they're all things that Hollywood would have been considering to make movies about at the time anyway, including Tarzan. Tarzan's been pretty regularly made into movies, especially through these early years of Hollywood.
Yeah, and there was a few silent versions, but then later on, Johnny Weissmuller was perhaps the more famous one.
I think that's definitely who Pepe's trying to reference here.
It has to be, given that the older Tarzan films were silent. I mean, you couldn't really hear Tarzan yell anyway. There is that too.
Yeah.
But again, lovely backgrounds here, very stylized. And again, it's just this surreal thing going through all these different sets that somehow meld all together, which is great. But
A screech to you is jungle love, yes? I am the daring young flea on the manly trapeze, no?
But here's another interesting reference. We got Penelope cornered on a cliff set. Was it Pearls de Pauline? And people may not know this, but it's a reference to The Perils of Pauline, and that's a serial that was done in 1914. It's incorrectly attributed, the whole woman being tied onto the railroads trope. It's incorrectly attributed to that, but that never actually happened in that serial. But it'd be a lot of things where she was like this adventurer going out and she would into all sorts of trouble. You can find them all, again, they're all in the public domain, given how old it is, but that's what that's referencing to.
Right. And it was pretty prominent at the time. It still stands as an important piece of cinema history.
Exactly. And especially notable because it has a woman in a leading role in such a prominent thing. So notable considering when it came out. So again, you can check this stuff out pretty much anywhere, given that it's in the public domain. And it's been preserved also. I believe the Congress in America selected it for preservation too, as it should. So one interesting thing about these Peppers is sometimes he'll realize that Penelope's a cat, sometimes not. It's all different. Here he realizes, oh, she wasn't a skunk after all. So what does he do? He blacks out his own tail and says the wonderful line, if you cannot beat him, join him. Because of course he does, right? And we still haven't even finished our references because we've got one more at the very end. We've got this war-torn set and it says, what's your price, Glory? And that's a reference to the 1926 silent film, What Price, Glory? So there's that too.
Yeah, and that whole phrase, what's your price, Glory? That's a phrase that means, what are you willing to give up in order to achieve greatness?
Yeah.
And so in this sense, Pepe was willing to give up his skunkiness in order to chase his love.
Such a romantic, isn't he? So this one pleasantly surprised me because, admittedly, the last few Pepes, they're not bad. Some of them have been a little bit on the cringiest side, admittedly, but this one was a nice breath of fresh air. And I get a kick out of these old silent references anyway, because a lot of the time I'll actually know what they are. And even if I didn't, I love looking up that stuff. I love going down these rabbit holes. Pepe's probably the weakest part, which is kind of weird because it's short. But in the end, even that's fine here. It's not overdone. It's done just enough. And the fake French, the wonderful designs, the music, animation, everything's top notch here. So this is actually one of the better Pepes. So this one gets a higher score, 8.5 out of 10 for me.
Nice, yeah. I'd probably give this one about an 8, I think, as well. It's got a lot of it going to it. It's classic Pepe. It follows all of those same tropes. So if you love Pepe, then you'll love this, of course. If you don't love Pepe, he only appears halfway through, and there's a lot more to offer. So I think you'll also love it too.
Yeah, so something for everyone. I'm going to say this in every review. Don't do what I did. If you buy that Pepe Le Pew set, please do not watch them one after another because they'll all meld together and you'll forget that there's nice little gems like this one in the middle of it all. So definitely go at your own pace. I think those new Looney Tunes Collector's Choice and now Collector's Vault volume have the right idea. And they have a nice mix, so you got a nice variety, as it should be, in my opinion. But yeah, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And until next time, take care. It's got to be French.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. There we go.
If you cannot beat them, join them. Wait for baby.